We started off the adventure that was met with a rainy morning here at F.J. McLean State Park, which is nestled right along the shores of Lake Superior. F.J. McLean State Park isn't just a peaceful place to camp, it's a site with history woven right into the Keweenaw Peninsula story. The park is named after Frank J. McLean, a Michigan conservationist and state legislator who was instrumental in the creation of Michigan's state park system back in the early 1900s. And the park was established in 1933 during a push to preserve more public lands. The land here tells its own story too. Sitting on the western edge of Keweenaw, it's known for its sweeping views of Lake Superior and some of the most stunning sunsets in Michigan. This shoreline was once a key navigation route for freighters and copper ore ships heading down the northern mines. If you look closely along the beach, you might even find some pieces of shipwrecked timbers or historic mining debris washed ashore. A subtle reminder of the area's rugged industrial past. We started out the drive that took us right through the town of Calumet. Even driving through, it's impossible not to notice how much the history clings to this place. Rows of brick buildings from the late 1800s still stand tall, and faded signs from old mining companies peek out from above the shop windows. Calumet feels like a town frozen in time. You could tell there are stories here, about copper, about people who came seeking fortune, and about the rise and fall of an industry that was built in this region. But for now, we kept moving as we'll be back later to explore more of the town. As we continued north, the scenery started to change. The roads narrowed, forests grew thicker, and ever so often we caught glimpses of Lake Superior's vast blue horizon. We decided to take a detour up the rough and narrow Brockway Mountain Drive, and I'm so glad that we did. This is the highest scenic drive between the Rockies and the Alleghenies at its highest peak. You're at about 1,328 feet above sea level. The road winds gently upwards, offering an incredible view, one after the other. And at the top, the Brockway Mountain Overlook offers a 360-degree panoramic view that stops you right in your tracks. At one side, endless green forest that roll as far as the eyes can see, and on the other, Lake Superior stretches out like an inland ocean. As we continued down, we stopped at another overlook that gave us our first glimpse of Copper Harbor, surrounded by dense forests and rocky cliffs. It feels like a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. Arriving in Copper Harbor, I was struck by how small and intimate it feels. It's quiet, remote, and full of character. We wandered through the local shops, each one offering something unique. Handmade crafts, Lake Superior stones polished to perfection, and even old mining relics displayed proudly. You get a sense of everyone here is connected to the history and the land. While exploring the charming shops in Copper Harbor, we couldn't help but strike up some conversations with some of the locals. There's a special kind of friendliness here. Everyone seems to know each other, and they're quick to share stories about the life in this tiny lakeside town. One shop owner told us about growing up surrounded by endless forests and the ever-changing moods of Lake Superior, describing the winters so deep and quiet you could hear the ice shifting out on the lake. Another spoke about their family's history, tracing back to the days of the copper rush, when this harbor buzzed with ships loaded with ore, bound for the Great Lakes. As they talked about what it means to live here, cut off from the bustle of modern life but deeply connected to nature, you get a sense of resilience that it takes to call Copper Harbor home. They also shared how tourism has become the lifeblood of the town today, with visitors drawn by its rugged beauty, history, and sense of isolation at the edge of the world. Hearing these stories gave me a whole new perspective. It's not about the scenery that makes Copper Harbor special, it's the people who carry forward its legacy to keep this tiny community alive. Speaking of history, Copper Harbor has a fascinating story. Back in the 1800s, this was the heart of Michigan's copper rush. Native Americans had been mining copper here for thousands of years, but when European settlers arrived, they industrialized the process. The harbor became the region's lifeline, with ships transporting copper ore out to the world and bringing in supplies for miners. The harbor itself is naturally sheltered, making it a safe haven for ships navigating the often treacherous waters of Lake Superior. Even today, it retains that sense of refuge. As you stroll near the docks, it's easy to imagine the clamor of the 19th century. Ships loading up with copper, traders haggling over prices, and miners arriving by the dozens in search of work. Another highlight was seeing the Copper Harbor Lighthouse. Built in 1866, it's one of the oldest lighthouses on Lake Superior. It replaced an even earlier structure from 1848, showing how vital this beacon was for guiding ships through the often treacherous waters. The lighthouse itself, with its red brick exterior and white tower, feels timeless. It's easy to imagine the fierce cold winters and the violent storms the light has seen. On the way back, we returned to Calumet. This town was once at the center of Michigan's copper mining boom. In the late 1800s, Calumet, which was then known as Red Jacket, was thriving. The Calumet and Hicla Mining Company dominated the area, employing thousands of miners, many of them immigrants from Finland, Cornwall, and Italy. Walking through downtown, you can still feel the weight of that history. The Calumet Theater, built in 1900, is a stunning example of the wealth the copper industry brought here. It's the oldest municipal theater in the U.S., and it's hosted many famous performances. As we wandered through some of the quaint shops in downtown Calumet, it wasn't just the handcrafted goods and vintage decor that caught our attention, it was the people. We talked with a few of the locals, and their stories gave us a deeper sense of what it's like to live in this historic mining town. One shopkeeper shared memories of growing up here surrounded by the reminders of Calumet's copper boom days. Old company housing, abandoned shafts, and grand buildings that once echoed with the energy of the thriving industry. Another spoke with a pride about efforts to preserve the town's heritage, restoring the Calumet Theater to keep traditions alive through community events. It became clear that Calumet isn't just a place frozen in time, it's a living community with deep roots and a strong sense of identity. These stories added a personal layer to the history, making every brick building and weathered sign feel even more meaningful as we continued our walk through town. Then there's the even more somber side of Calumet's history. This town was also the site of the Italian Hall disaster in 1913, a great tragic event where over 70 people, mostly children, were killed in a stampede during the miners' strike. Standing near the site where the hall once stood, you can feel the weight of that history and the struggles forced by the workers fighting for safer conditions and fair pay. As I walked, I kept thinking how this place, once alive with the sound of the industry, has quietened down over the decades. Today, Calumet feels almost like an open-air museum, but there's also resilience here. Locals are working to preserve these historic buildings and share the town's stories with visitors like me. While Calumet may not be the booming city it once was, but it's full of little reminders of a time when this area supplied the world with copper and of the people who made it all happen. As we headed back out on the road, our final leg took us through south of Marquette and onto the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. Marquette, with its historic downtown and massive ore dock stretching into Lake Superior, feels like a fitting gateway to the part of the UP. It was an incredible day of exploring and learning the history of Keweenaw Peninsula and how the copper mining industry shaped America. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.